Welcome to the March for Science Minnesota Everyday Scientist Interview Series. I'm Dr. Nicole Morris with March for Science Minnesota, and I have Dr. Christine Dolph with me today. Christy is a research scientist at the University of Minnesota in the Department of Ecology, Evolution, and Behavior.
That's right.
And we're so delighted to have you here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We started this interview series because over the last year, we heard reports that a lot of Americans say they don't know any scientists. And so we thought this was a great opportunity to bring interesting scientists to your fingertips so we can all reimagine who and what a scientist may be. And then also find that many of them are walking among us in our community doing other everyday things that you may not realize. There are scientists walking among us. So one of the ways that you are doing that is you're involved in some sort of political activism, correct? So you've done some work in city elections.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you've done?
Sure. So over the past couple of years, I have been involved in some city council issues, helped out a lot with the city council campaign in the last election cycle, and I sort of arrived there through working on issues like raising the minimum wage in Minneapolis and police violence. And then I have also been involved in some climate action related activism.
Yeah. Well, that sort of lends itself to the work that you do. So I'd like you to explain sort of what your research is all about. And for those of you who have watched our past interviews, you know that I like to do a challenge to our scientists because we have a hard time in saying what we do in a succinct, plain language. So I'm going to put a challenge to you to tell us what you do in 30 seconds or less and as much plain language as you can do.
Okay.
You up for it?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, all right. And go.
Okay. So I am an aquatic ecologist. I study streams and rivers, lakes and wetlands, and my focus is on how human activities on the land affect water quality, and especially how it affects the whole biodiversity of life that relies on fresh water to survive.
Nice. That was way under the
Yeah.
Great. Nice work.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm curious, there's so many fields of science that you could choose, or really just choosing to get into science altogether is an interesting path. So I'm curious, how did you choose that path? Was that something that you always wanted to do or always saw yourself doing?
So that's a good question. When I think back on it, I don't think I knew I always wanted to do science, but I do think that I was kind of drawn towards study of the natural world because from a young age as a kid and growing up kind of as a introverted, shy kid, sometimes needing to escape from the world, the place where I felt the most at home and the most connected, to the world was in nature, and so a lot of times I would go and walk in the woods in the neighborhood where I grew up. There were also a couple of ponds there, and so when I was feeling especially, weird about my life, I would go and walk in those woods and just feel better, feel just more connected to the big picture, I guess.
Right.
And that is also where I first started, noticing the birds in the park and the different ducks, and became a bird watcher. And so I think, some of my interest in ecology stems from sort of this stronger emotional attachment to natural places.
Right. Yeah. Well, that makes total sense that then that passion in your personal life would really translate into science. And then also, why you might be involved in these political issues surrounding climate change. But that kind of brings me to one of my next questions, because there's been a fair amount of debate, and certainly around the time of the last March for Science last year, which was, should scientists really be involved in political activism, and what is our role in politics, and where it intersects certainly with our own science. So really, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I love that question because that's kind of where I'm struggling right now. I think it's kind of a fraught question of how do we do activism in science. And I actually get the most uncomfortable when my activism approaches like my areas of scientific expertise, you know, around water quality or environmental management. And I think that is because as scientists, you know, our sort of training and our philosophy is that we are neutral. We're not biased. And we can provide information to other people, other stakeholders, and then they make, you know, difficult decisions about what policies to make, what to do with that information. So I think a lot of scientists, and myself included, get really uncomfortable when you start talking about advocating for a particular, you know, stance or an issue. But what I've been thinking about lately is, you know, if the goal of science is to inform decision making so that we can create a safe and healthy planet for everyone,
Right.
This kind of approach where we're just standing back and trying to remain neutral really hasn't been that effective, given that, you know, we are experiencing a climate crisis. And so climate change is kind of like a glaring example for me here.
Right.
We've known, you know, for more than a century, scientists have known that humans are impacting the climate, and yet we have governments still very resistant to taking any action, you know, on climate. And certainly the Trump administration has been, you know, moving us backwards
Right.
instead of forwards in terms of addressing climate impacts or reducing climate impacts. So what I'm starting to think that scientists need to really grapple with this issue of institutional power and how that limits our ability to get our information out. And, you know, in particular, I can think of very powerful interests, like fossil fuel corporations are a good one. They have a vested interest in denying climate science and deferring action on climate policy. They also have a lot of resources. They have a lot of influence over policymakers. And they have kind of this big communication infrastructure they can use to get their ideas out, and that Fox News is kind of what I'm thinking about there. So they have a way that they've built up to, you know, shape attitudes of people. So to take on that powerful of an entity, you know, on behalf of the public good is really challenging, and I don't think that is something individual scientists can solve by just like getting their data out. Like, it's too big, it's too powerful. So I'm interested in whether there's ways that scientists can work collectively with grassroots movements around kind of subverting that power and doing science that is used in decision making to benefit all humans.
Right.
So I think that's where I start to think, you know, being objective or removing ourselves from these political issues, that in itself is a political choice, and that might not be the actual choice we want to make if we're interested in science-based decision making.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what you're talking about, taking on the government and taking on these huge companies, that is a tremendous amount of work and takes a lot of energy, where I imagine you're already spent at the end of the day, where you have been, you know, working all day, doing your job in science, and then we have home life, and so I imagine a lot of our viewers are saying the same thing. I work full time, I've got small kids at home, I don't have any time or bandwidth or energy to do this other work. So, you know, I'm curious, almost sort of selfishly, because I have the same challenges. How do you grapple with that, or how do you try to continue to do this work when you're so full already?
Yeah, I think it is really challenging, and I don't have like a lot of super easy bullet like to solve all these problems. I mean, what I've been thinking about is things that make me feel better about doing this are, first of all, just not being scared to get involved in something, even if you're not sure what the broad impact is going to be, if you're not sure it's going to work. Like, I think we all need to think about trying new things, and I think if change is going to happen, it's going to involve a lot of different people experimenting with different approaches. So I think it's okay to be confused. I think it's okay to like experiment with different things and see how it feels. And I also think no matter what, it is really valuable if you just show up to these movements, to a campaign, to whatever it is. I think when I first got involved in a city council campaign, I just basically showed up cold. Like, I didn't know the person running personally. I hadn't worked on a campaign like that before, but I was really interested in city issues, and they were so welcoming. They were really glad to have me. I think none of these movements can happen, unless people are willing to talk to their neighbors about city issues or things like that. So I think just showing up, not feeling like you need special credentials or training to be an activist. I think you can learn things as you're there, and I think not being afraid to get it wrong is helpful. And then I did bring my daughter to many protests in the last year. She's 5.
That's critical. I have to say, the March for Science Minnesota board meetings are always filled with small kids, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to do both.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and that's great. Like, it's so awesome when people are just like, yeah, bring your kids.
Right.
Like, we got to do this with the kids, and I'm hopeful that they are also seeing us do this, and it might make an impact for them down the road too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Dolph.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been so sort of inspiring to hear what you're doing and how you're managing to do all of this on top of everything that you're already doing, and I hope you're going to inspire our viewers to get more involved and step outside of their comfort zone, and get involved in some activism. So if you're looking to hear of more great scientists like Christy, please join us at the Rally for Science. This is upcoming April 14th at the St. Paul Capitol Grounds. I hope you're going to be there.
Yes, absolutely. I will
Great.
be there.
Okay, awesome. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.